Hi, my name's Catherine McNulty, and I am the founder of Grief Inspired. And today is a momentous occasion, and I'm excited to share it with all of you. So this conversation is the 10 gifts of grief and the lessons that grief has taught me. And so I want to be able to share with you really the culmination of what has happened for me and what I have learned over the last 10 years. So I'm hoping that what I say today is either going to resonate with you because you know some of it from personal experience, or it's maybe going to be something that's going to give you some things to think about. And you know, it really starts with that we're all on this journey to get through this crazy thing that we call life, like Prince so eloquently said in his song, Let's Go Crazy. And I think that given the state of the world today and what's happening, and we're all being trapped inside, that, you know, there's more and more time for us to think about the big things in our lives. And so I think that that's why I'm hoping that this will resonate with more of you. And it's really given us the opportunity to look within, to reevaluate our lives, to learn what's going on with us so that we can begin to create a new and better future. I think that that's what we're all looking for. Everyone's looking forward to 2021 because we think that things are going to be better and that our future is going to be different. And for me, it's December 15th, 2020. And back on December 15th, 2010, a full 10 years ago today, I went into premature labor with my son, Jackson Robert. And I shouldn't have been going to the hospital. I shouldn't have been going into labor. And to be honest, when I started going into labor, I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know what it meant to have a 27-week-old baby. And I had no idea of the repercussions of that and what could happen. And so a baby that's 27 weeks is basically, you know, I had him a full 3 months too soon. And, you know, babies need that time in the womb to grow and to mature. And, you know, this is called the gifts of grief because my son lived for 42 days and 42 nights. And he then passed away, and everything that's happened in this 10 years has really been life-changing for me. And I had no idea, and it was completely unexpected. And I've been through all of the pain and the heartache, and if you've lost someone close to you, you know what that feels like. And you know, here we are 10 years later, and I call them the gifts of grief because I believe in my heart and in my heart of hearts that going through grief and what I went through in losing Jackson has really made me into the person that I am, has really changed everything about my life, and I had no idea. And sometimes that we think that, you know, change is bad, and I think that, you know, one of the lessons is that change doesn't have to be bad. It is what it is. So I thought I'd show you before I jumped into my 10 gifts of grief and the lessons they taught me. I wanted to introduce you to Jackson if you don't know him. This is Jackson Robert. So this is the day that we removed life support. He looked perfect here. It's good photography. It's being able to remove some things. Anyways, there's ways that they can do it. And so, wow, 10 years. So I would have a 10-year-old today if he had survived all of this. And I was every year on his birthday, I have a video of him that I watch, and I get out all of the things. I spend the day and I take the day to, you know, to grieve and to remember and to honor him. And so, You know, there's always tears, there's always laughter, there's always stories, and there's a lot of looking within. This is his little preemie outfit that he was wearing. That's super cute, and it's preemie, so he was like very small. And just to give you a sense of how little he was, I thought I would show you this. So these are his footprints. And you can see how small they are, right? So next to my thumb, this was his actual size of his foot. So there he is. So let's jump in to the 10 gifts of grief and what they are. And I'm going to start at number 10, and I'm going to work my way back to 1. So number 10 is family is a gift. So I've learned, and these are gifts of grief because these are the things that I've learned. So you can agree with me, you can disagree with me. Let me know, put some comments as we go through these. But number 10 is that family is a gift. And it's, you know, first you have to think of the concept of family. And it's so easy to define our family as our, you know, genetic blood relatives, but I have an expanded view of family, and I think of family as the people that are in our lives, the people that we love, the people who are there for you when the shit hits the fan, when things go bad. They're the people who you in turn will be there for no matter what, without question, because that's what you do and that's who you are. So it's not necessarily biological, although it can be, and I am so greatly privileged and honored to have, you know, 2 sisters who have really helped walk me through this over the last 10 years. And they were there and they heard all of it in the beginning. For sure. When I was in my dump mode, dumping everything out, right? Cause there's so much emotion and I didn't know what to do with it. Hi Deb, love you too. Thank you so much for watching. You are amazing. And again, you know, people that are your family are not necessarily, it's not necessarily biological. And again, it's the people that you carry in your heart. And the other thing that I want to point out is that when we're talking about family, your family doesn't necessarily have to be alive either, right? So we're talking about grief, we're talking about death. Your family is comprised of all the people that you've loved, whether they are alive or dead. And the relationship does not end with the death. I think it can grow. I think it can continue on. You never forget. You don't forget the people, you know, anyone who's had a strong impact on you at any point in your life, you know, you hold them close. And I've had people, you know, I'm doing my Christmas cards right now, and I have people that I don't talk to, you know, the way I used to. I mean, you know, the nurse who took care of Jackson with us, she is, you know, I would do anything for her because she did so much. So if she were ever to call me and say she needed something, I would be there, right? I consider her to be like family. You know, same thing with, I had a nurse that was really dear to me, Elizabeth, if you see this, you know, who really took care of me when I was in the hospital on bed rest with my son, Mason. You know, and she was the one who was there for me every day when I was mortified that, you know, he might not survive and that I might lose another child, because I was worried that he too was going to be premature. So again, you know, family doesn't have to be alive and it doesn't have to be biological. It's who's in your circle. And, you know, I want to encourage you to, you know, ask yourself, like, who is your family? Who are those people? Who are your ride or die people? Who are going to be there if something happened for you? And who would you be there for if they needed you? I think those are the people, that's your family. And I think that, you know, these are the people that you love. And I think loving them is a strength. And I think that love that you share and the stick-to-itiveness, right? The fact that they're still around, they're still with you through the good and the bad, through the hills and the valleys. That love and that commitment is a gift, right? So family is a gift. So that's number 10. Number 9 The number 9 gift of grief is learning that suffering and pain is not all bad. I mean, we spend our lives avoiding pain. We run from it. We do everything we can. And when it happens to us, we curse it. We ask ourselves, why does this happen? We get angry at it. But it doesn't necessarily have to be all bad. And think of it this way. Think of somebody that you know who's gone through something, some sort of really heavy tragedy. Isn't it true that those people, the ones who go through the big stuff, are usually the nicest people? They're the people who are going to show up for you. Those are the people who are going to be compassionate. And it's because they have a sense of knowing. You know, they suffered and they learned. You know, and the other thing is that when we see other people suffer, that's hard, and we want to turn away, and we want to avoid, and we want to act like we don't see it. But again, people who have been through some of the hard stuff are the ones who are much more willing to lean in and to reach out and to offer help and to want to do something rather than avoid. And I think that that's a gift. And the reason why they can do that is because they've been through the suffering, they've been through the pain, they've grown from it, they've learned from it, and then they get into a position where they received, and so they're in a position where where they want to give. It becomes part of who you are, I think, or at least a lot of people. So let me know if you know what I'm talking about, if this makes any sense to you. Let's see. Yeah, and I think that the other thing that I have here on my notes is that when you're going through suffering and when you're running from pain and all of it, I mean, I think the one thing that happens is that it forces you to look within. It forces you can't pay attention to the world so much. You just, in order to survive, you have to just hold on and look within, and you kind of need to be a little selfish, particularly early in the grief process. But you got to look at yourself, and you got to be able to look in the mirror. And I think that there's lessons in that. I think that it's scary. I don't think that it's easy, but I think there's lessons in it. And I think that the lesson and the gift is that you can learn that suffering and pain are not all bad. And if you've actually processed it and you've gone through healing from whatever you've gone through, I think you would agree with me that that what you went through isn't all bad. It isn't all bad. There's not a lot, there's not necessarily all good either, right? But I think it's the dichotomy that's so important to remember. So that was number 9. Number 8, the number 8 gifts of grief, and the lesson that this taught me is building resiliency. And resiliency is a word that, we hear a lot, but do you know what it means? And I ask you, what does resiliency mean of you? I define resiliency as so say for example, when I lost my son, right? Life basically cut me off at the knees. I didn't know what to do. I didn't expect it. It came out of nowhere. It just knocked me out, and life basically took me out of the game. And resiliency is the ability when that happens to pull yourself back up, to get back up, and to keep going on. And early on for me, I didn't know how I was going to survive. I didn't know that anybody could survive losing a child. And I could not see a future with anything but pain. But then you do. And you start to realize, hey, wait a minute. I've gotten through a month. I've gotten through 3 months. I've gotten through a year. And for me, I've survived 10 years. And it's the process of building this resiliency. So once you've lost someone so close to you, when something tragic happens again, everything that you've learned from that first experience comes back into play. And there are things that you've learned. And so that helps build your resiliency. And so, over time, for me, it's been 10 years of learning resiliency. It started with losing a child, but then things like, how many of us go through divorce, right? You need resiliency to get through a divorce, to pick yourself back up and say, who am I and who do I want to be? And what does that mean? And over time, you build that resiliency with everything that you've been through, everything that you've fought through. And what happens is the time that it takes you to get back up gets shorter. And that's what building resiliency is. And so after 10 years, there's not going to be a lot that's going to take me out of the game for very long, right? There's some things that absolutely will knock me down. I have, I want to say a friend, someone I know who's been recently re-diagnosed with cancer, and so many people are. And that's a whole different level of grief. And that's something that can take you out of the game. But she has resiliency because she's been through chemo, she's been through radiation, she's been through it. And so she knows the path. And she's resilient. And it's a gift, having that resiliency and building that resiliency so that you know that no matter what happens in your life moving forward, you can be resilient and you can get back up. And I know that no matter what happens, I will get back up if I can until that day when I just can't get up anymore. And to me, that's what building resiliency is. And that's why that resiliency is a gift. And it's remarkable too, because I have a 7-year-old now, right? And because of what I've learned, I can now, all of these things, right? I can teach to him, and I can share my experience and help him learn what resiliency is and what it means to be able to get. And let's see. Number 7. Let's move on to number 7. These are the top 10 gifts of grief and the lessons that they taught me. That life is not meant to be done alone. And this is an interesting one. And this was a big lesson for me because I used to really pride myself on being able to, say, I don't need anyone, right? I might have to stop this. I'm getting what seems like emergency phone calls here. So I may have to go and jump back off. But life is not meant to be done alone. And I used to pride myself on not needing anyone. I set up my life so that I wouldn't be dependent on a man, right? The schooling that I did and the education that I went through and the career that I chose for me moving into sales, so that I would have an income so that I could support myself no matter what. I was setting myself up to be that island and to protect myself. But here's the thing, is I thought that was where strength came from. And what I've learned and what I've been teaching myself and over these 10 years, that strength comes with connection. Strength comes from knowing that asking for help and needing support is not a sign of weakness. And that we all deserve to have people support us. And it's about a give and take. Think about it this way. I mean, marriages don't work when one person does all the taking and the other person does all the giving. It has to be about that give and take, that back and forth. Friendships don't work when one person is the one who's doing all the work in the friendship, who's doing, again, all the giving, and the other party just takes and doesn't give back in return. So think about that. Think about your relationships. I mean, some of the best relationships, right, are the ones where you're supportive of each other, where you can have times when, like Deb's one of my ride or dies, right? I can call her and say, look, this is going on. And she'll be like, look, I got you. And then there'll be other times when she'll call me and she'll be like, man, like I just need to talk. And so it's that back and forth, and it's that give and take. And, you know, that we begin to learn that in order to receive, we must first give. And that is by far one of the best lessons that I have learned. And that we need to make sure that we're giving, and not just being a person who takes, because the more you give, the more you will receive. And this life was not meant to be done alone. And I can tell you, I've tried it. It doesn't work. So you got to find those people. You got to find a few people. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you can't do it alone. You can't be an island. And that is one of the gifts that grief has taught me. Number 6. Number 6 is that all things in life require practice. And I think that, you know, especially even just practicing with our life. And it's giving up the desire for perfection, and remembering that everything is practice. You know, and it's so funny that, you know, my 7-year-old plays the piano and he doesn't want to play for anybody else because he's like, I'm worried about being embarrassed. You know, what if I, you know, don't do it perfectly and then I'll be embarrassed. And so it's the lesson is, you know, who's teaching you that you have to be perfect? Why is it not okay to fall and to have other people see you fall and get back up again? Like, it's okay. Like, life is supposed to be practice. And there's things that we don't know how to do. And the way to get better at them and the way to improve is to try and to practice. You know, this is one of the things early on in grief, I didn't know what the hell to do. I mean, honestly, no one talks about it. Nobody tells you what the how-to is. I had no idea. But I started to learn, and I started to walk, and then I started to run, and it's practice. And so now I can apply that to anything in my life, and I can just remind myself and say, look, this is a practice, and I'm going to fall down, and I'm going to do it shitty, and I'm going to like maybe mess up and maybe make a fool of myself. But that's okay, because the lesson is that all things require practice, including your life. So where is it in your life that you're wondering where you need some more practice, or where you don't want to practice because you're worried about being embarrassed, or having someone see you fall down, or having someone see you fail? There's a lesson there, and it's about repetition and doing it again and again and again, and it's about constant learning. We don't need to expect ourselves to be good at everything. There's things that we're good at, and there's things that we're not so good at. And you practice and you get better at the stuff that you're not so good at. And that's a lesson that I've had to teach myself. And it's amazing because I find myself telling my 7-year-old the same thing. But it's a lesson that I'm learning myself. And I'm teaching myself by way of telling him. So it's remarkable. And I think it's an important gift. It's an important gift, a gift of grief. Number 5, so we're halfway through. Number 5 is that there's meaning. There's meaning in loss, and there's meaning in the pain of your loss. And one of the things that I think is surprising to most people, particularly early on in the grief process, is how much it hurts. I talk to people all the time who lose parents, and they'll call me and say, I had no idea how hard this was going to be. And I don't know why we don't think that it's going to be hard. You know, these are people we love. These are people we want in our life. These are people that we, you know, if they're children, if they're babies, we wanted them. We had plans 20 years into the future. Why would we expect it not to be hard? And we have to remember that the intensity of the pain that you feel due to loss is really because of how much you love the person. So if you didn't if you didn't have that love, you wouldn't hurt so deeply. And I think that that's profound. And I think that it walks us to another gift of grief, that there is meaning in the pain of loss. There's meaning that you hurt. You hurt for a reason. And that hurt wouldn't be there without love. And, you know, one of the things that I really dive into with my own grief, and the things that I find fascinating about the whole process, is this whole dichotomy. The dichotomy of, you know, pain and love. The dichotomy of, you know, stepping into darkness and then looking toward the light. These things that kind of go hand in hand. And you can't have one without the other. You can't have life inherently without death. And I'll talk about that, you know, a little bit later, but it's another dichotomy. And here's the thing, it's the essence of who we are, right? It's the human experience, is knowing that we're going to be here on this planet for a finite period of time, and that we ourselves are going to die. And it's really, you know, it's a compilation of all of it. So here's the thing that, you know, meaning in the pain of loss. The thing about loss too, is it makes us think about our own pending finality. And it makes us look back on our life. And this is where it comes into, you know, looking within and understanding more about yourself and what your life is, and looking back on the life that you have, and saying, look, this person was here and now they're gone, and you have memories of who they were to you and what they did in the world and what they meant to you and the impact that they had. And my question for you is, when you look back on your life, and if something were to happen to you, what impact would you leave? And who would be touched, who would be hurt by your demise? And now that you know you still have time, what else could you be doing? How else could you be using your time? And what do you want to do with the time that you have remaining? Take some time and think about that, because it's deep shit, deep stuff. But I think it's something that we all need to look at and we all need to think about. Number 4, the number 4 gifts of grief, is that grief will change you. Again, I started at the beginning saying how grief fundamentally changed who I am as a person. I am not the same person I was before losing my son, Jackson. It's just everything. Everything is different. I can't think of, you know, and it was, for me, it was a bit of a rediscovering of myself and who I was because of that looking within. And it's everything that Grief Inspired is built on that change, and understanding that change and devolving that change and saying, well, why did this happen? And what does this mean? And really diving in and looking at it. You know, and here's the thing, is that change is scary. None of us like change. Is like, you know, when we lose somebody we love, we start to freak out because it's scary. But just like you can't unsee something that you've seen, once you've lost someone close to you, you can't go back to who you once were, right? Losing Jackson fundamentally changed everything about my life, and I couldn't go back. And I started to develop this sense of knowing, this knowing about grief and what I was feeling and the emotions. And, you know, I started to see things differently. I started to see the world in a new light. It's almost like a filter was put in front of me, and it changed my perspective on everything. And you can't undo that. And it's, you know, it's the filter of grief. And if you've experienced deep grief, you know what I'm talking about. And there are things that change. I mean, and we could talk about, you know, I've done whole podcasts on, with other people on how grief changes you. And that's coming out, I think, in March, maybe February. And it's big and it's significant. And, the people around you change, and the things that you have in your life change, and what's important to you and the things that you value. All of these things can change. And they do change, because you fundamentally become a different person when you walk through grief. Number 3, we are hardwired to learn. We as a society, we as humans, we as people, we have this natural striving in us. We want to learn. We want to grow. We want to know more. I think it's just something that's natural. And we want to understand, and we want to know, and we want to seek for answers. And it starts to beg the questions. The biggest life questions are, why are we here, and what does it all mean, right? And the biggest thought leaders spent years thinking on those few simple questions, and it's something that we all should be pondering if we're not. And it's not like it's something that we do every day, but take a moment and we start to search for answers. And I think that going through the grief process, saying, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? Why does this happen to anybody? Why do some people lose their children? Why do some people lose their adult children? Why do these things happen, and how does it happen to you? Why do we lose our parents far too soon? Why do some of us get cancer that's debilitating and ultimately takes our life? I mean, these are big, heavy questions, and I think that when you're in it, you have no choice but to ask these questions. And I think that, that the natural, inherent, hardwired nature of us is try to find those answers. And some people do, and some people don't. And I think that some people give up too soon. And I also think that there's some questions that we may never find the answers to, and you just look within and you try to find a peace with those questions that might not necessarily have concrete answers. You gotta find those answers within. And again, that's more of looking within. And it's an opportunity to grow. Every time we're learning something, it's an opportunity to grow. And it's more of a way to become more of who we already are, to increase who we are, to learn more about who we are and what our life means and what that's all about. And it's funny, I spoke with a customer, and he was considering buying my product. And I said, okay, well, are you guys growing as an organization? Is this one of the reasons why you want to buy this product? And he says, well, I hope so, because if you're not growing, you're dying. And I thought that was interesting. And I took a minute and I thought about that. And I'm like, okay, well, I think he's right. And I wonder, do you believe that if you're not growing, if you're not enriching, if you're not increasing who you are as a person or your life as a whole, does that and then mean that you're dying or shrinking or becoming less or losing, right? It's this whole thermodynamics, right? The state of entropy, that if you're not working against it, things will eventually devolve. Do you believe that? And that's why we're hardwired to learn. That's what I believe. And I look at that as a gift, because what that means is that my grief and my grieving was an opportunity for me to grow and for me to learn. And it's an opportunity for you to grow and to learn. And I think it's also, this is one of the reasons I think why early grief is so difficult. We don't like to live in a space where it's uncomfortable. Our minds are designed to keep us safe, to keep us comfortable, and to keep us in the knowing. And when we get into a situation where we start to be uncomfortable, where we feel uncertain, right? There's massive uncertainty in the earliest days of grief, and not knowing what your future is going to hold, and not being able to look out and say, I don't know, right? After I lost my son and I came back home without a child, I did not know what my future was going to look like, because everything that I knew, everything that I thought I knew, everything that I had worked for no longer had the value that I thought it was going to have in my future. And so I had to start new. And it was uncomfortable. It was uncertain. It was feeling completely out of control. And I think that we try to learn to give us a sense of that control, that as we learn more, as I learned more about grief, right? That's part of the reason why I'm here now, is because I had to know. I needed the answers. I needed to learn. I needed to say, I need to understand this thing, right? If I'm going to get through this, I need to learn it. And so, Grief Inspired is built on those fundamental principles. That one, you need to learn about your grief. Two, you need to learn about yourself and what your grief means to you, right? That's the looking within. And then third is, what is your grief? And because you've lost the people or person that you've lost, what does that mean with your relationship to the rest of the world? Because your perspective has now changed. There's learning, there's education, there's a knowing that you have to come through. And that's on the other side of that learning is healing. And that's the process. And that's how you get through grief. And that's how you learn and become okay and heal. And there's so many people who don't do that. They stop the learning and they say, this is it. This is my path. This is my destiny. This is, I got a bad rap. My life is going to just suck from here on out. And that's where they live in that space, and they become victim, right? Because now they feel victimized, and they feel like, well, this happened to me, and the external world has done this to me, and I've been wronged, and I've been betrayed, and now I'm going to be resentful, and I'm going to fight back. But we're hardwired to learn. So when you suffer deep, deep grief, let's get to learning. And Deb, I love your word stretched. Yes, you're stretched like you didn't know you could be. And I think that learning too is going back to the resiliency, is realizing that you can be stretched and that you can come back and you can stand up and you can go on and you can continue to fight the fight. And I think that inherently is a gift. So that was number 3. Okay, so we're into the top 2. And coming to find these was hard to put these in order, right? Because I think they're all important. But number 2, this is a big one for me, and I've really, it's been 10 years in the making, but this is something that's really come into my life. I would say it definitely in 2020. It's definitely one of the lessons that I'm going to take away from 2020. And it's that we are the creators of our lives. I was just talking about that sense of feeling out of control, and we don't like that feeling. Well, the reality is that we are the creators of our lives, and sometimes we forget, and sometimes we don't know, and sometimes somebody needs to tell us. And Brene Brown, I listened to her quite a bit, and she quoted a rabbi who said this, and I thought it was so, so good. She said, despair is believing that tomorrow is going to be filled with the same misery as today. And that's what despair is. And that's why, when I lost my son, I think that's why it was so hard, because I didn't see anyone around me who had lost a child and survived. And so early on, I was convinced that this was my lot in life, that despair was my future, that I was just going to be heartbroken, and that there was nothing I could do, that I was going to feel the pain of sadness, loss, forever. And I've been researching a guy named Joe Dispenza, and if you don't know him, look him up. He's becoming very, very popular lately. And what I love about what he does is he looks at the neuroscience behind our actions. And he helps us understand why we do what we do, from the mind perspective, and how our mind is what creates our experience. And he talks about our brains, and he says when you're thinking about your brain and think about all the memories that are in your brain, all of those memories are stacked up, and they're all the things that you remember all about your past. Your brain is a record of your past and all the experiences that you've been through. And I want to make sure that I get this right. And then our brain, from those memories, our thoughts of those memories, our feelings from those memories, create our behavior. And it creates our behavior that then puts us into the future. So all of a sudden, all the past things that we've been through and everything that we've gone to launches us into our future. And if your past is full of pain and heartache and misery, that becomes what you know. That becomes what you think about. That becomes what you feel about. And then all of a sudden, that launches into your future. So let me give you an example. I have a 7-minute video of my son when he was alive, the day before we removed him from life support. And I watch this video once a year on his birthday, and I cry just like I cried this morning. But when I'm doing that, here's what I'm doing, is when I watch that video, it launches me back to that moment in time because I was there. And I remember what I was thinking, what I was feeling, what the experience was like. And it's debilitating, and it makes me cry. But it makes me cry in the moment. So all of a sudden, those past memories have come flooding forward, and it's now in my present. And I took all of that pain, and I chose to do that today, because I believe you can learn from the pain, right? That's some of the other lessons. But you bring that pain forward, and now all of a sudden that pain's in your future. So we have to watch that. And what's unique about this, and what's really interesting, is that anything that we think in our brain does not know the difference between something that happened for me 10 years ago on the day that Jack passed away, or today. If I'm thinking the thoughts, if I'm reliving the experiences, it's like I'm there. But the magic in what he's teaching is that if that is the case, you can also create a new future that's not built on the memories of the past, that you can actually create a vision for the future that you do want, that's full of love and hope and joy. And it's a practice. Going back to the lesson about practice, it's a practice, but it's possible. His work is just fascinating. And I have here that it is our minds that create our reality. And once we realize that our minds are what's creating our reality, we can practice creating a vision for the future that's independent of the past. And so when you get up each morning, you can start the day, and that your day today does not have to be the same as yesterday. It doesn't have to come out of all those memories. It doesn't have to share the pain, the frustration, the heartache of what you've already been through. You can start fresh. You can start anew, and you can create a new and different future. And that is a lesson that when you get it, will change your life. Tell me if this is making sense, please, please, please. Okay, so number one, so this is the last one, and I know these were lengthy. I don't know how long we've been on here, but I'm going to finish up here with the last one. And this is the biggie, right? This is, we each only have one life. and that life that we have is a gift. And that without death, if we didn't know that we were going to die, if we didn't see other people die, if we didn't experience the pain of loss, if we didn't experience the pain of burying the people that we love far too soon, we wouldn't cherish the life that we have. We wouldn't cherish the life that's ours. And going back to that dichotomy, you can't have one without the other. You can't have a true, meaningful life without knowing that death is coming. And we wouldn't understand that life is such a gift, and we wouldn't treat it the same. And when we see other people die, we get reminded that our own life and the time that we have on this earth is finite as well. And it's our responsibility to decide, consciously to decide how we're going to spend the time that we have here. And that is a gift that grief has taught me. I live my life differently because I know that my life is finite. And I know that my time on this planet is a gift that will not last forever. And although so many people want to push grief and death aside and not think about it, that only works for so long. Because eventually, one of my friends said today when I was talking about this, she said, everybody gets that appointment. And you don't get to miss that appointment. And I thought that was so good. So hopefully she'll see this. So my question to you is, what have you learned through your loss? What are your top 10 gifts of your grief? And what are the lessons that you've learned? And I want to encourage you to use some of this time that we have cooped up alone in our houses, away from the people that we love. What have you learned? Reflect on it. Know that it's learning and that you're growing. So in summary, I want to run through the top 10 real quickly. Number 10, family is a gift. Number 9, suffering and pain aren't all bad. Number 8, building resiliency is a gift. Number 7, life was not meant to be done alone. Number 6 is that all things require practice, including living. Number 5 is there's meaning in the pain of loss. Number 4, grief will change you. Number 3, we are hardwired to learn and to grow. Number 2, we are the creators of our lives. We are in control. And number 1, we only have one life, and that life is a gift. Losing my son 10 years ago, here he is. Looking at him and watching his video today like I did, it still makes me cry. But there are times when I can tap into his presence, and it's his presence, and maybe it's the presence of God holding him close. But on the day when he passed on, there wasn't pain, there wasn't tears until later, because I think I was being held up, and I think I was being supported by some higher power that I call God. But I can tap in when I get really quiet, like I did this morning. If I meditate, it takes me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to a meditative place where I can really tap in to what I consider to be a higher level of consciousness. And I can feel that his presence is there, and I know. And I think that that is an amazing gift. And I am blessed to have known Jack for the short period of time that I knew him, to have him as a child, to have walked through the pain of losing him, And now to be able to give hope to those who are walking through their grief too. It is an honor and a blessing to be able to share what I've learned. And thank you for listening to me. And I hope that these 10 gifts of grief will make you think, will make you realize that it doesn't have to be all bad, that you can't hide from grief, that you need to go through it, and that you can and you will find healing. And as always, if I can help you on that journey, if you need somebody to walk through your grief, you let me know, because I will be there to help you every step of the way. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.